Welcome back to HOA Meltdown Moments. The group chat loved her story until the proof dropped. You just earned yourself a re-inspection. Karen screamed that I was being defensive, which proved guilt in her mind. She stood in my driveway holding a bright cone she had just set down like she owned the sidewalk, waving a laminated sheet at me with one hand and jabbing her finger toward my truck with the other. I had asked to see the camera footage she claimed existed, and now she was yelling that only the HOA decides what gets shared. Her voice climbed higher with every sentence. I work as a property maintenance supervisor in Orlando, and I know how these things are supposed to go. This was not it. She took a step closer. This community has standards, she said. Her name was Kimberly Nash, and she was the neighborhood communications lead for the Pine Hollow Property Owners Association. That title meant she controlled the email blasts, the bulletin boards, and apparently the definition of guilt. She had shown up 20 minutes earlier with a printout that accused me of stealing a set of HOA pool keys on a lanyard and taking $200 in petty cash from the clubhouse. The printout had my address at the top and a list of bullet points underneath, all written like established facts. No question marks, no alleged, just flat accusations. I asked her where the proof was. She said she had video. I asked to see it. That was when she snapped. Now she was telling me the re-inspection would happen within 48 hours, and if I did not comply with every single item on the list, the association could move forward with enforcement. I asked what enforcement meant. She smiled. "We can tow first and explain later," she said. Then she turned and walked back to her car, leaving the cone in my driveway like a marker. I moved the cone to the curb and went inside. My hands were shaking. I had been living in Pine Hollow for 6 months, and this was the first time anyone from the HOA had come to my door. The neighborhood was a newer subdivision on the east side of Orlando, all matching facades and strict guidelines. Every mailbox looked the same. Every lawn had to stay under 3 inches. The rules were printed on the website in a 10-page PDF with subsections and footnotes. I had read them before I signed the lease, and I knew I was in compliance. But Kimberly did not care about compliance. She cared about control. The accusation did not make sense. I had never used the pool. I did not even know where the pool keys were kept. And I had never been inside the clubhouse except once during the move-in walkthrough. But the printout listed my name, my address, and a date 3 days earlier when the theft supposedly occurred. It also said a vendor had reported suspicious activity. No vendor name, no details, just the word vendor, like it was a title that carried weight. I needed to figure out what was happening before the re-inspection. I was on probation at a new job, and I could not afford to miss work for HOA hearings and disruptions. The job was stable, but it was also strict about attendance. One write-up and I would be back to square one. So I had 48 hours to clear my name, and the clock was already running. My phone buzzed. It was a text from the HOA management company. The message was short. Compliance inspection scheduled for Wednesday at 9 in the morning. Failure to provide access will result in escalated enforcement. I read it twice. Wednesday was 2 days away. I replied asking for clarification on what they were inspecting. No response. I opened my laptop and logged into the HOA portal. There was a new notice posted under my account. It was the same printout Kimberly had brought, but now it was uploaded as an official document with a case number. The timestamp said it had been created 40 minutes earlier, which meant she had printed it, driven to my house, yelled at me, and then uploaded it while sitting in her car. The document listed the stolen items again. A set of HOA pool keys on a lanyard, $200 in cash. And now there was a new line at the bottom. Violation of community trust standards. Immediate action required. I clicked through the rest of the portal looking for a way to dispute it. There was a form for submitting maintenance requests and another form for reporting violations, but nothing for defending yourself. I tried the contact page. It listed the management company office address and a phone number. I called. The line rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message explaining that I had been accused of theft without evidence and needed to speak to someone as soon as possible. Then I hung up and stared at the screen. The doorbell rang. I got up and looked through the peephole. It was a man in a polo shirt holding a clipboard. I opened the door. He said he was from the towing company and he was here to verify my vehicle information. I asked why. He said the HOA had requested a standby authorization in case of non-compliance. I asked what that meant. He said it meant they could call him back within 72 hours and he would tow my truck without another visit. He did not look happy about it. He said he was just doing his job. I asked if he had seen any proof of a violation. He shrugged. He said the HOA pays him, so he does what they ask. Then he read my license plate number out loud into his phone and took a photo of my truck. I asked who he was talking to. He said dispatch. I asked if Kimberly Nash had called him. He looked at me for a second, then nodded. She called about 20 minutes ago, he said. Told me to come out here tonight and get it on file. He walked back to his truck and drove off. I stood in the doorway watching his taillights disappear. Kimberly had called the tow company while staring at me. She had read my plate number out loud. That was the first escalation beat. She was not bluffing. She was building a paper trail to justify taking my truck. I went back inside and pulled up my doorbell camera app. The camera covered my front porch and part of the driveway. I scrolled back 3 days to the date on the accusation printout. I watched the footage at double speed. Nothing. No one came to my door. No one touched my truck. No one left anything. I checked the timestamp. It matched the day Kimberly claimed I had stolen the keys and the cash, but I had been at work all day. I pulled up my work schedule on my phone. I had clocked in at 7 in the morning and clocked out at 6 in the evening. 11 hours. No way I could have been at the clubhouse. I took a screenshot of the schedule and another screenshot of the doorbell camera timeline showing no activity. Then I exported a 30-second clip from the morning showing me leaving for work and another clip from the evening showing me coming home. I saved everything to a folder on my desktop and labeled it evidence. I needed more than that. I needed to know who actually took the keys and the money. And I needed to know why Kimberly was so sure it was me. The next morning, I drove to the management office. It was in a strip mall off Colonial Drive, tucked between a nail salon and a tax prep service. The office was small, just a desk and a waiting area with 3 chairs. A woman in her 50s sat behind the desk typing on a computer. I told her my name and said I needed to speak to someone about a false accusation. She looked up and frowned. She said the property manager was out until Thursday. I said I had an inspection scheduled for Wednesday. She said she could not help me with that. I asked if I could file a written rebuttal. She said I could leave a note and someone would get back to me. I wrote a 2-page rebuttal by hand on a legal pad she gave me. I explained that I had been at work during the alleged theft, that I had doorbell camera proof, and that I had never accessed the clubhouse or the pool. I signed it and dated it. She took it and put it in a folder without reading it. Then, Kimberly walked in. She stopped when she saw me. Then she smiled. She walked up to the desk and set down a stack of papers. She said she was here to drop off the finalized complaint forms for my case. She did not look at me. She spoke to the woman behind the desk like I was not there. The woman took the stack and added it to the folder with my rebuttal. I asked Kimberly if we could talk. She said no. I asked if she could show me the video she claimed to have. She said the evidence was being reviewed by the appropriate parties. I asked who the appropriate parties were. She said that was confidential. I asked if I could at least see a still image or a timestamp. She pulled out her phone and showed me a cropped still image. It was so zoomed in and low resolution that I could not tell what I was looking at. It could have been anyone. It could have been nothing. I asked for the full video. She said no. Then she turned to the woman behind the desk and said I was not allowed to speak during the inspection. She said I had been aggressive and uncooperative, and she wanted it on record. The woman looked uncomfortable but nodded. Kimberly left. I stood there for a moment. The woman behind the desk would not make eye contact. I asked if she had written down what Kimberly just said. She said yes. I asked if I could see it. She said no. I left and sat in my truck in the parking lot. My hands were shaking again. Kimberly had just tried to silence me in front of a witness, and the witness had gone along with it. I pulled out my phone and called my cousin Marcus. He worked private security at a hospital in Winter Park, and he had dealt with plenty of HOA drama in his own neighborhood. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. Then he said I needed to get an ally on the inside. Someone who worked for the HOA or the management company. Someone who could see the records and tell me what was really going on. I asked how I was supposed to do that. He said start with the people who have to interact with Kimberly every day. They probably hate her too. I thought about it. The only person I had met who worked directly with the HOA was the security guard who patrolled Pine Hollow at night. His name was Daryl. I had talked to him a few times when he stopped by my driveway to check if everything was okay. He was older, maybe 60, and he had a calm way of speaking that made him easy to trust. I did not know if he could help, but it was worth a try. That night, I waited until I saw his patrol car roll past. I flagged him down. He stopped and rolled down his window. I asked if he had a minute. He said sure. I told him about the accusation and the inspection and the tow threat. I told him Kimberly had called the tow company while standing in my driveway and that she was trying to silence me at the management office. He listened, then nodded slowly. He said Kimberly had been pulling this kind of thing for over a year. She had accused 3 other residents of various violations, and every time the accusations fell apart under scrutiny. But by the time they fell apart, the residents had already paid fines or moved out. He said Kimberly had access to the clubhouse, the pool storage, and the petty cash box. She was one of only 3 people with that access. He said if something went missing, she was the most likely person to know about it. Or to take it. I asked if he thought she was stealing. He said he did not have proof, but he had seen her leave the clubhouse late at night carrying bags that looked heavier than they should. He said he had mentioned it to the property manager once, and the property manager told him to mind his own business. I asked if he would be willing to make a statement if it came to that. He said he would, but he was leaving town tomorrow night to visit his daughter in Atlanta, and he would not be back until the following week. That meant I had less than 24 hours to get his statement before he left. That was the time pressure. He gave me his personal number and told me to text him if I needed anything before he left. Then he drove off. I went back inside and started putting together a timeline. I had my work schedule. I had my doorbell camera footage. I had Daryl's statement that Kimberly had access and opportunity. I needed one more thing. I needed to prove that Kimberly had lied about the vendor report. The next morning, I called the clubhouse. No one answered. I drove over. The clubhouse was a small building near the pool with a covered patio and a locked storage room. The door was locked. I walked around the perimeter looking for cameras. There was one camera mounted above the main entrance. I took a photo of it with my phone. Then I noticed something. The camera was angled down toward the door, but it was also angled slightly to the left, which meant it would not have captured anyone walking up from the parking lot. It would only capture someone standing directly in front of the door. I walked back to my truck and checked the accusation printout again. It said a vendor had reported suspicious activity. But if the camera did not cover the parking lot, how would a vendor have seen anything? And which vendor? I pulled up the HOA website and found a list of approved vendors. There were 8: landscaping, pool maintenance, pest control, trash pickup, pressure washing, HVAC, plumbing, and a general handyman service. I started calling them. The first 3 had no idea what I was talking about. The 4th, the pool maintenance company, said they had not been to Pine Hollow in over a week. The 5th, the pest control company, said they had been there 2 days ago, but they had not filed any reports. I kept going. By the time I got to the handyman service, I was ready to give up. But the guy who answered said something that made me stop. He said Kimberly had called him yesterday and asked him to confirm that he had seen me near the clubhouse storage room 3 days earlier. He said he told her no, he had not seen me at all. He said she got angry and told him he must have seen someone, and if he could not confirm it, she would find another vendor. He said he hung up on her. I asked if he would be willing to put that in writing. He said sure. He said he was tired of HOA boards trying to bully vendors into lying. He emailed me a short statement that afternoon. I saved it to the evidence folder. Now, I had 4 pieces of evidence: my work schedule, my doorbell camera footage, Daryl's statement about Kimberly's access, and the handyman's statement that Kimberly had tried to pressure him into lying. It was not enough to prove Kimberly was the thief, but it was enough to prove I was not. The inspection was scheduled for the next morning at 9. I texted Daryl and asked if he could stop by before he left town. He said he could swing by at 7. That gave me 2 hours. He showed up at 7 on the dot. I gave him a printed copy of everything I had and walked him through the timeline. He read it carefully, then nodded. He said it was solid. He said I should bring it to the inspection and make them put it on record. He said if they refused, I should email it to the management company and copy the HOA board. He said the important thing was to create a paper trail that they could not ignore. He also said I should ask to see the access control report. He said the clubhouse door had an electronic lock that logged every entry. He said if Kimberly claimed someone had accessed the storage room, the log would show who used their fob. He said if the log did not show my fob, it proved I had never been inside. I had not thought of that. I asked how I could get the report. He said the property manager had access, but they would not give it to me unless I formally requested it. He said I should email the request before the inspection and reference the Florida Homeowners Association Act, which required associations to provide records to members within 10 business days. I sent the email at 7:30. I referenced the statute and asked for the access control report for the clubhouse covering the past 2 weeks. I also asked for copies of any vendor reports or complaints filed against me. I copied the entire HOA board and the management company. Then I waited. At 8:45, I got a reply. It was from the property manager. It said my request had been received and would be processed within the statutory timeframe. It did not say anything about the inspection. At 9, Kimberly showed up with 2 other people. One was a man in his 40s wearing khakis and a Pine Hollow polo. The other was a woman in her 30s with a tablet. Kimberly introduced them as board members. She did not give their names. She said the inspection would take approximately 30 minutes, and I was required to provide access to my residence, my vehicle, and any outdoor storage areas. I said I would provide access, but I wanted to submit my rebuttal first. I handed Kimberly the printed packet. She took it without looking at it and handed it to the woman with the tablet. Then she said the inspection would proceed regardless of any rebuttals. I said I understood. She walked toward my front door. I unlocked it and stepped aside. They spent 20 minutes walking through my house. They looked in closets, under sinks, and inside cabinets. They did not find anything. Kimberly did not speak to me the entire time. When they finished inside, they went to my truck. Kimberly asked me to open it. I unlocked the doors and stepped back. She looked in the cab, the glove box, and the bed. Nothing. Then she walked to my outdoor storage closet and asked me to open it. I unlocked it. She looked inside. Nothing. She stepped back and looked at the man in khakis. He shrugged. She looked at the woman with the tablet. The woman said she had not seen anything on the checklist. Kimberly frowned. Then she said the inspection results would be submitted to the board within 48 hours. She turned and walked toward her car. I called after her. I said I had submitted a records request and I expected a response within 10 business days. She stopped but did not turn around. She said records requests were handled by the management company, not by her. I said I knew that. I said I also knew the clubhouse had an access control log, and I wanted to see it. She turned around slowly. She said the log was not available to residents. I said Florida law said otherwise. She said I could take it up with the board. Then she got in her car and left. The other 2 board members followed without saying a word. I stood in my driveway and watched them drive away. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus. I told him what had happened. He said I needed to escalate. He said I should file a formal complaint with the management company and demand a hearing. He said I should also consider filing a police report for harassment. I said I was not sure the police would take it seriously. He said it did not matter. He said the point was to create a record. He said if this ever went to court, I needed to show that I had tried every reasonable avenue before taking legal action. I filed the complaint that afternoon. I attached my evidence packet and requested a formal hearing. I also called the non-emergency police line and filed a report for harassment. The deputy who took the report sounded skeptical, but he gave me a case number and said someone would follow up within 72 hours. That night, I got a text from Daryl. He said he was at the airport and he would be back the following Tuesday. He said to let him know if anything happened while he was gone. I thanked him and told him I would keep him updated. The next day, I got an email from the management company. It said my hearing had been scheduled for the following Friday at 6 in the evening. It said I was allowed to bring 1 witness and up to 10 pages of documentation. It said the board would review the evidence and issue a decision within 30 days. I read the email 3 times, 30 days. That meant I would be under suspicion for another month. That meant Kimberly could keep harassing me, keep threatening to tow my truck, keep trying to silence me. I needed to end this faster. I spent the next 2 days digging. I went back through the HOA portal and downloaded every document I could find. Budget reports, meeting minutes, vendor contracts, violation logs. I was looking for a pattern. If Kimberly had been stealing, there would be evidence somewhere. Missing line items. Unexplained expenses. Duplicate charges. I found it in the petty cash ledger. The ledger was posted as a PDF under the financial reports section. It listed every deposit and withdrawal for the past year. I opened it and started scrolling. Most of the entries were small. $20 for office supplies, $50 for event snacks, $15 for printer ink. Normal stuff. But then I saw it. 3 entries over the past 6 months, each for $200, each labeled as reimbursement to Kimberly Nash for community events. No receipts, no details, just reimbursement. I checked the meeting minutes for those months. There were no community events listed, no budget approvals, no votes. Just 3 withdrawals, all signed off by Kimberly. I took screenshots of the ledger and the meeting minutes. Then I went back to the vendor contracts. I pulled up the pool maintenance contract. It listed a monthly fee of $300. I checked the payment log. Every month showed a payment of $300 to the pool company. Except for 2 months earlier this year. Those months showed payments of $350. An extra $50 each month. No explanation. I called the pool company again. I asked if they had ever charged more than $300 per month. The guy said no. I asked if they had any record of payments over $300. He put me on hold and came back 2 minutes later. He said their records showed they had only ever received $300 per month. He said if the HOA was paying more, someone was pocketing the difference. I asked if he would send me a statement confirming that. He said he would have to check with his boss. I gave him my email and waited. The statement arrived an hour later. It was short and direct. The pool company had never received more than $300 per month. Any payments above that amount were not received by them. I added it to the evidence folder. Now I had proof that Kimberly had been siphoning money from the HOA for months. Small amounts. 50 here, 200 there. Enough to add up over time, but not enough to trigger an audit. And now, she was trying to cover her tracks by accusing me of stealing the exact amount she had taken most recently. $200. I needed one more piece. I needed proof that Kimberly had access to the pool keys. Daryl had said she was one of only 3 people with access to the storage room. I needed to know who the other 2 were and whether they had alibis for the day the keys went missing. I called the management company and asked. The woman who answered said she could not give me that information. I said I had a right to know under the records request statute. She said access logs were not covered under that statute. I said I would file a formal complaint if she did not provide it. She sighed and put me on hold. When she came back, she said the 3 people with storage room access were Kimberly Nash, the HOA president, and the property manager. She said the president had been out of town the week the keys went missing, and the property manager had been working remotely. That left Kimberly. I asked if there was a way to verify that. She said the access control log would show which fob was used. I asked if I could see it. She said my records request was still being processed. I asked when it would be ready. She said she did not know. I hung up and called Marcus again. I told him what I had found. He said I needed to bring it to the hearing and force the board to address it. He said if they tried to ignore it, I should demand an independent audit. He said the threat of an audit would make them take me seriously. The hearing was 2 days away. I spent those 2 days organizing my evidence into a binder. I printed everything. The work schedule, the doorbell camera screenshots, the vendor statements, the petty cash ledger, the pool payment discrepancies, the access control confirmation. I labeled each section with a tab and wrote a 1-page summary at the front explaining the timeline and the contradictions. The night before the hearing, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. It was the records custodian from the management company. She said she was calling to let me know that my records request had been fulfilled. She said the documents were available for pickup at the office, but I was not allowed to photograph them. I could only review them on site. I asked why. She said it was company policy. I said that did not make sense. She said those were the rules. I drove to the office the next morning. The custodian was waiting for me. She brought out a file cart with 3 boxes of documents. She said I had 1 hour. I asked why. She said the office closed at noon. I looked at my watch. It was 11. I started pulling documents. The access control log was in the second box. It was a printout with 2 columns. One listed the date and time. The other listed the fob number. I scanned through it. Most entries were tagged to fob numbers I did not recognize. But there was one entry on the day the keys went missing. Fob number 743. Logged at 8:15 in the evening. I asked the custodian whose fob that was. She said she could not tell me. I said the whole point of the records request was to get that information. She said fob assignments were confidential. I said I would file a complaint. She shrugged. I took notes on everything I could. I wrote down the fob number, the date, and the time. I also found a vendor invoice packet in the third box. It had sections covered with sticky notes and highlighter. The notes said confidential and do not copy. I peeled one back. Underneath was a line item for clubhouse supplies. $200. Approved by Kimberly Nash. No receipt attached. I took a photo with my phone before the custodian could stop me. She yelled at me to delete it. I said no. She said she would call security. I said go ahead. She picked up the phone. I grabbed my notes and walked out. I sat in my truck and reviewed the photo. The invoice packet was dated 2 weeks before the keys went missing. It showed that Kimberly had approved a $200 withdrawal for supplies, but the supplies were never itemized. It was the same pattern. Small withdrawals with no backup. And now she was accusing me of stealing the exact amount she had been taking. The hearing was at 6. I had 6 hours to prepare. I went home and added the new information to the binder. Then I called Marcus and walked him through the updated evidence. He said it was solid. He said the board would have to address it or risk liability. He said if they tried to sweep it under the rug, I should make noise. He said I should contact a lawyer and threaten a lawsuit. I did not want to hire a lawyer. I could not afford it. But I needed the board to think I would. So I drafted an email to a local attorney I found online and asked for a consultation. I did not send it. I just saved it as a draft so I could mention it during the hearing. At 5:30, I drove to the clubhouse. The hearing was being held in the conference room. When I arrived, there were already 6 cars in the parking lot. I recognized Kimberly's. I also recognized the property managers. The rest I did not know. I walked inside. The conference room was set up with a long table at the front and 2 rows of chairs facing it. Kimberly sat at the center of the table with the property manager on her left and 2 other board members on her right. There were about 10 residents sitting in the chairs. I did not know any of them. I took a seat in the front row. Kimberly looked at me and smiled. The property manager called the meeting to order. He said we were here to address a formal complaint filed by me regarding a theft accusation. He said I would have 10 minutes to present my case, and then the board would ask questions. He said the board would deliberate and issue a decision within 30 days. I stood up and walked to the front. I set my binder on the table. I opened it to the summary page and started talking. I said I had been falsely accused of stealing HOA property and petty cash. I said I had been threatened with towing, harassed at the management office, and subjected to an invasive inspection without cause. I said I had proof that I was not present during the alleged theft, and I also had proof that the accusation was part of a pattern of financial misconduct by the person making the accusation. Kimberly interrupted. She said I was out of order. The property manager told her to let me finish. I continued. I walked through the timeline. I showed my work schedule. I showed the doorbell camera screenshots. I showed the vendor statements. Then I showed the petty cash ledger and the pool payment discrepancies. I showed the invoice packet with the covered sections. I said the evidence pointed to one person. I said that person had access, opportunity, and motive. I said that person was Kimberly Nash. Kimberly stood up. She said I was defaming her. She said I had no proof. I said I had plenty of proof, and I was prepared to share it with an independent auditor if the board refused to act. I also said I had contacted an attorney, and I was prepared to file a lawsuit for harassment and defamation if the accusation was not retracted immediately. The property manager looked at Kimberly. Kimberly looked at the other board members. No one spoke. Then, one of the residents in the back row stood up. She said she had experienced similar issues with Kimberly. She said Kimberly had accused her of a violation last year, and when she asked for proof, Kimberly threatened to fine her and restrict her access to the pool. She said she had paid the fine to make it go away, but she always suspected it was a shakedown. Another resident stood up. He said the same thing had happened to him. He said Kimberly had accused him of parking violations and demanded payment, but when he checked with the towing company, They had no record of his vehicle ever being flagged. If this story sounds familiar, or you have ever dealt with an out-of-control HOA, hit that like button and subscribe for more neighborhood revenge stories. The room was getting louder. People were talking over each other. The property manager banged his hand on the table and called for order. He said the board would take the new information under advisement and would issue a decision after a full review. He said the meeting was adjourned. Kimberly stood up and tried to leave. I stepped in front of her. I said she owed me an apology and a written retraction. She said she did not owe me anything. I said if she did not retract the accusation, I would make sure every resident in Pine Hollow knew what she had been doing. She said I was bluffing. I pulled out my phone and opened the Doorbell camera app. I pulled up the clip from the day she claimed I had stolen the keys. I turned the phone toward her and pressed play. The clip showed my driveway. Empty. No one there, just my truck parked in the same spot all day. The timestamp was clear. I had been at work. I scrolled to another clip. This one showed Kimberly walking up to my door earlier that week, before the accusation. She was carrying a small bag. She set it down on my porch, took a photo, and then picked it up and left. I had not noticed it at the time because I was not home, but the camera had caught it. I asked her what was in the bag. She did not answer. I said it did not matter because the timestamp proved she had been at my house before she accused me, which meant she had been planning the frame-up. Her face went white. She tried to grab my phone. I stepped back. One of the other residents pulled out their phone and started recording. Kimberly froze. She looked around the room. Everyone was staring at her. The property manager stood up and said the board would conduct an internal review and that Kimberly would be required to communicate only in writing going forward. He also said the HOA would be forced to produce records for an independent audit, and any contradictions would become public. Kimberly turned and walked out. She did not say a word. The next week, I received a formal letter from the management company. It said the accusation against me had been retracted. It said the board had reviewed my evidence and determined that there was no basis for the claim. It said I would not be subject to any fines, fees, or further inspections related to the matter. It also said Kimberly Nash had been removed from her role as neighborhood communications lead pending the results of the audit. 2 weeks later, the audit results were posted on the HOA portal. The auditor found multiple discrepancies in the petty cash ledger and the vendor payment records. The total amount missing was over $1,500. The auditor recommended that the board pursue legal action and file a police report. Kimberly resigned from the board the next day. A week after that, I saw her moving out of Pine Hollow. I did not say anything to her. I just watched from my driveway as the moving truck pulled away. Daryl came by that evening. He said he had heard what happened. He said he was glad I had stuck it out. He said most people would have just paid the fine and moved on. I told him I could not afford to do that. He nodded. He said he respected that. Then he handed me a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a set of HOA pool keys on a lanyard. He said he had found them in Kimberly's car during a routine patrol 2 weeks earlier. He said he had been holding on to them as insurance in case things went south. He said I could do whatever I wanted with them now. I took the bag and thanked him. I filed a police report the next day. The deputy who took the report said it would be forwarded to the fraud division. He said it might take a while, but they would follow up. A month later, I received a check from the HOA for $300. The letter attached said it was reimbursement for the time and expenses I had incurred defending myself against the false accusation. It also said the board had implemented new financial controls to prevent future misconduct. I cashed the check and put the money toward a dash cam for my truck. I also installed a second doorbell camera on my back door. I was not taking any chances. Marcus called me a few weeks later to check in. I told him everything had been resolved. He said he was proud of me. He said most people do not fight back when HOAs come after them. He said they just take the hit and hope it goes away. I said I could not do that. I said I had too much at stake. He said that was the difference between people who survive HOAs and people who get crushed by them. He said the ones who survive are the ones who refuse to back down. I thought about that a lot over the next few months. Pine Hollow was quieter after Kimberly left. The new communications lead was a younger guy who actually responded to emails and did not threaten people. The board held a town hall to address the audit results and apologize for what had happened. A few residents came up to me afterward and thanked me for standing up to Kimberly. They said they had wanted to do the same thing but did not know how. I told them the trick was documentation. I said you have to create a paper trail that they cannot ignore. I said you have to be willing to escalate and make noise. I said you have to treat it like a job, because to them, it is a job. They are trying to wear you down. If you outlast them, you win. One woman asked me if I ever regretted moving into an HOA neighborhood. I said yes and no. I said yes because the rules are exhausting and the people in charge often abuse their power. But I also said no because fighting back taught me something important. It taught me that people like Kimberly only have as much power as you give them. The moment you stop being afraid, the moment you start documenting everything and demanding accountability, their power evaporates. She nodded. She said she wished more people understood that. I wished the same thing. A few months later, I was talking to a coworker who lived in a different HOA neighborhood across town. She said her HOA was going through something similar. The president was accused of misusing funds, and the residents were organizing a recall vote. She asked if I had any advice. I told her the same thing I had told the woman at the town hall. Document everything. Create a paper trail. Do not let them intimidate you. And if they try to silence you, make more noise. She thanked me and said she would pass it along. I thought about how many people were probably going through the same thing right now. How many residents were being accused of violations they did not commit. How many were being threatened with fines and towing and access restrictions. How many were paying money they did not owe just to make the problem go away. I thought about Kimberly and how long she had been getting away with it. A year, maybe more. Small thefts, small lies, small abuses of power. All of it adding up over time until someone finally said no. I was glad I had been the one to say no. I was glad I had fought back. And I was glad I had won. But I also knew that for every Kimberly who gets caught, there are probably 10 more who do not. People who abuse their HOA positions because they know most residents will not fight back. People who count on fear and exhaustion to keep them in power. That is why I decided to share this story. Not because I think I am special, but because I think more people need to know that fighting back is possible. That you do not have to accept bullying from your HOA. That you have rights, and those rights mean something if you are willing to enforce them. If you are dealing with something similar, start documenting now. Save every email, record every conversation, take photos and videos, build your evidence folder. And when the time comes, do not back down. Because the moment you stop being afraid is the moment you take your power back. Kimberly learned that the hard way, and I am betting she will not forget it. Until next time, take care and stay safe out there.